Welcome. This is a little advertisement on why you should join our group, why this group should be a part of you. Here we work for the classic battle of good and evil, the priest or the pimp. Where the pimp is somebody who knows how to manipulate and intimidate people, he's the Darwin alpha male. He surrounds himself with people weaker than him, and then he can move into the foothills and do all the consuming while everybody else does all the producing for him. In this camp, he's the bad guy. On the other side, because there's a priest, there's the Catholic alpha male, the traditional American Yank. He straightens himself up emotionally, even though that's not a natural thing, and he becomes a well-adjusted person, as well-adjusted as a human being's going to get. And then, should he choose, he becomes a good husband, then a good father, and it spills into home economics. And it's home economics that gets everybody out of poverty and into plenty. It's home economics that made the United States such a magical place to live. And so that's what this is all about. And since most people only have a few minutes, let's get started. Both the Catholic and the atheist define mental illness as the normal taken into the abnormal, from a cold to the flu to pneumonia. The Catholics say, hold on here, the normal is normal but not good enough. For example, sit in a chair and fantasize about the gals until you become aroused. Open your eyes, do it again, only this time you're fantasizing about actually getting the gal pregnant. And there you go. Now you understand what a sense of original sin is with a snap of a finger. Those very powerful emotions, to associate them with actually getting the gal pregnant, not a natural thing at all. But it is a true thing, and so that's what you do. You add the other things to it, such as race relegated to an endearing quality of your parents and a few more. So if you're a gal or guy, if you're a gal, sit in a chair and fantasize about becoming pregnant. You're actually becoming pregnant. Those very strong physical emotions with becoming pregnant. And automatically, you're going to start thinking about building a nursery and building a house and running a household. And if you're a guy, you're going to naturally straighten up your back and start trying to come up with a budget, trying to go out and plow the field and that sort of thing, so you can come up with a budget for this. And it all works out. The kids start to have shoes on their feet. You start to become a normal, well-adjusted person. On the other side is a pimp. So sit in a chair, fantasize about sex, separate the act of sex from the act of getting the gal pregnant, and then you'll be amazed how suddenly you're much better at hustling. You don't lie, you just don't tell the truth. You start to get good at it. And in this world, that's the bad guy. You start to realize such things as it's no longer the communist versus the fascist, but rather the cruel, queer, atheistic communist and fascist, or to bum a phrase from the 1950s, they're a bunch of queer scoundrels. And you'll start to see just who the bad guy is. There are two kinds of those sorts of people who know how to manipulate people. One is the chimpanzee side of us. All human beings do that naturally. And the other is people who know how to manipulate and intimidate people intentionally. And so there's those two groups. Those intentional characters, some people call them intellectuals, some people call them satanic. It just depends on who's doing the talking. To go in the other direction is not a natural thing at all, and you need that dot on the lowercase letter I. This stuff comes out of popes and monks in monasteries, and that's where you get God and country from. And so we hope you join this group, and to that end, you can do two things right off the bat. You can publicize and come up with a course that teaches us first a sense of original sin. You have to be taught that just so you can choose one way or the other. And then you can come up with tactics to stand up to a cheap pimp. We have ours here. There's nothing copyrighted, you know. The second thing you can do is, if you're up to it or willing, if you're a gal, to get into the shoes of a home economist, and then you have a husband and 4 children and in a 3-bedroom brick house on a half-acre lot, How much of a budget would you need to get the shop up and running, to get the household going, to get everybody out of poverty and into plenty? And if you're a guy, how many hours would you have to work in order to come up with that budget? If you have a job, a construction worker is a job, a professional athlete is not a job, it's a consuming thing. So if you have a job, how many hours would you have to work to come up with that budget? If you know those two things, and you know just where to go and you know where you are now, there's a whole army of gals that have children and they're not about to be able to make ends meet or get medical bills paid or anything. And there's a whole army, a class of guys who could work 3 or 4 times the amount of hours in a day and never come up with enough money to go back to home economics. That was done intentionally. Well, and so we're hoping you'll join our group. We can do something about it. On YouTube, it's The Priest or the Pimp. On Facebook, X, and Instagram, it's Time to Act. And don't forget Truth Social and those sorts of things. And so we hope to see you there. But now, if you have a few more minutes, we can add a few things that will help, especially those highbrow types that are influencers on YouTube and that sort of thing. We can add a few things that will help them. So we hope you'll join this gang in the playground. And so let's pause and then continue. We're back. We keep getting flagged by YouTube. I'm not sure why, but let's continue. In the early 1970s, there was a profound change in our society, and it happened in 4 areas: in psychology, in philosophy, in the courts, and in economics. In philosophy, that's when counselors came into being. And that's when they changed things. Things such as homosexuality, which used to be considered mental illness, was now okay. And the bum's rush there was that they threw out the whole idea of being a normal, well-adjusted person. That being not a natural thing. The bum's rush there was that they snuck in the idea of being the Darwin alpha male, a guy who knows how to manipulate and intimidate people. He doesn't will the good of another person. He surrounds himself with people smaller than him, and he becomes the head honcho. He moves into the foothills and does all the consuming while everybody else lives in the valley and does all the producing for him. And that's the well-adjusted Darwin alpha male. In philosophy, 3 things make up God and country: straightening up your emotions, willing the good of another person, having the leadership style of washing the feet of the apostles, and doing it because Christ rose on the 3rd day. The disposition in the sheriff of Dodge City that defends the poor and the oppressed for no good reason. The most famous of the famous, Aristotle and Socrates and those guys, they'll say that's the way to go. Hold that disposition and then head out into society again and good things happen. But they'll also say, well, the truth of the matter is, if there is no God, the highest standard of living is to be a psychopathic nut. And you do go into the foothills and you sit there and everybody produces things for you. And that's the highest standard of living a human being can have. And so going back to that disposition in the sheriff of Dodge City, there's some missing thing there. It's as if there was a plug in the guy's head and you have to plug that disposition into something for it all to make sense. Whatever they're plugging that thing into, that's called faith. That's called God. And that's what's held as faith. If you hold that as faith and then head out again, good things happen. You start to breed a breed of normal, well-adjusted people. If you arrange the parameters of competition so that there's a large middle class, then there'll be a large middle class. It's as simple as that. That's God and country. It's Catholic. In courts, the courts came out and said, we decided that there will be no religion in government. And in doing so, they threw out those 3 things that we were talking about. In doing that, they institutionalized the idea of being malicious, And they made it okay to make money by causing other people to have to work more hours. They caused poverty. Judges wear black robes because Catholic priests 500 years ago in Great Britain wore black robes. And the word judicial, the very word, why they call it that, is because it's the word judicial means to establish facts that are true as true. And that's as opposed to the word sophistical, which means to establish facts that aren't true as true. And since the 1970s, we've been living in a judicial court. And it's one of those logic things. You can stand there all day long and argue to your heart's content, but you can't argue the installation of a judicial court. So what you do is you take a step back and say, okay, Christ is truth itself. And because of that, then you bring in a judicial court. That's God and country. It's the God and country stuff. And that was thrown out. In economics, they threw out home economics in favor of individual rights. So what is home economics? Home economics is the smallest economic thing. It's what gets you out of poverty and into plenty. 10-year-olds can't pay for their mommies. Mommies can't take care of the household and go and plow the fields. Dad can't go and plow the fields and take care of the house. And so the mom and dad are viewed as one person, and they have a living room to live in and a kitchen, a dining room to eat, and a kitchen to support the dining room. And it clicks in as a single unit. A garage with a car, a backyard, and that's how you get a detached house from the 1950s. It's home economics. Everybody gets out of poverty and into plenty. So, picture a 1950s American household. It's right here. Now go off to the side and at the bottom. Start with farming and mining. Then above that, manufacturing. Then above that, wholesale, retail, and repair. Then above that, retirement, education, and recreation. The doctors and lawyers form a kind of lattice that holds it all together, and it's the priest that causes it to come into being to begin with. This comes out of popes and monks and monasteries and that sort of thing. And that's home economics. And so those four things are what we're talking about. And I'm sure there's something there that you can use. Between all that, we hope you'll join our gang in the playground. By the way, to sneak something in, did you notice something? Economics and the court, judicial, and your psychology, those are all incidentals. Fulton Sheen pointed out they're incidentals raised to absolutes. You don't do that. They all go up to a point, and that point is Catholicism. That's what Catholicism is. Okay, so I'm sure there's something there you can use, and I hope you'll join our gang in the playground. You know the things we need to do. You need to start publicizing a sense of original sin so people can decide to begin with, and then you put the priest on one side and the pimp on the other. And we have lots of anecdotes on how a pimp recruits a prostitute, and hopefully you'll come up with a way of standing up to them. Nothing copyrighted, you know. And then if you're a gal, you have a house with 4 children and a husband, how much of a budget do you need to get the shop up and running? And if you're a guy and you have a job, a construction worker is a job, a professional athlete is not a job. If you have a job, how many hours do you have to work in order to come up with that budget? With those 2 things, and along with some of the eggheads out there, you can start to do good things. You can do something about all this. So it's the YouTube channel is called The Priest or the Pimp, and on X and Instagram and Facebook it's called Time to Act, and don't forget Truth Social and Reddit. And so we hope you join the group, and thank you for listening.